Okay, so I just thought I would do another video to be able to give a little bit more context to my situation. Praise God, there's a lot of really good things that are happening. But let me adjust this. It's a live stream. I'm just talking into the webcam. Um, there's a lot of good things that are happening. Number of recent progress and breakthroughs. Praise God. Um, I'd like to make a couple of things clear. Uh, I know my situation is really, really abnormal, and I just watched the introductory video that I posted 5 months ago. Intro, to my situation. I feel like I wrote a pretty good explanation of it. Um, Looking back on it, I realized that the situation with psychiatry as some sort of abstract science, um, and legalities and um, alleged spiritual issues and alleged miracles and things like that would probably seem really alienating to most people. Um, I want to make a couple of things clear. When I talk about miracles able to be proven, I really do mean what I say. I'm not a dummy. I've done concert level piano. I've studied 7 languages. Um, I I have what they call a systems oriented mind. There's many things I can do. Um, First of all, the experience that I have spiritually is that I can see in the spirit, and every day I take time to, update if God gives me some discernment about a lie that I'm believing or something that's attached to trauma or something like that. There have been very significant, miraculous things that have been happening with me, and I think I might do some more videos to give a little bit more context to those things. But it doesn't mean that I'm delusional. People, psychiatry. One of the problems here is that science. I had an old music theory professor that was a friend of mine who came to court with me, and he said I never would have believed it till I saw it with my own eyes how people in your situation get railroaded. The judge had his eyes closed. I've had medical professionals allege to me that there's pharmaceutical corruption here in Texas. There's a number. Most people who talk to me, they say it's a learning curve. Getting acquainted with the actual issues and the complexity, stuff. Um, but when I talk about provable miracles, there's things like um, a taxi cab driver, that I found out his name years later, came and picked me up when I was in homelessness within 20 minutes of God. The situation, there's an arc of the narrative, and there's 16 different time periods. For people to appreciate the dynamics, there's a lot of backstory, and most people who get to know me, they call it a learning curve, like I've said. They say it's like a learning curve. There's a lot to digest and stuff. Um, so there's a number of things. There was a man who I know by name. I know what church he goes to. He picked me up in homelessness within 20 minutes of me crying out to God to send me a ride to church. If I felt like he showed me I was dealing with false guilt and rejection because of stigma that I was dealing with at length. I happen to be spiritually sensitive, and I had an inner healing of a childhood issue when I read the book Wild at Heart. That's all I'm going to say. Something with my dad. Uh, God showed me that him screaming at me when I was young uh, affected me in ways that I didn't understand. And I believed in Jesus my whole life, but God showed me there was a root memory, and there was an issue of fear that was there, fear of failure, and that it had defiled my conscience, is what you might call it. There was a family conflict that came out of this. I've not come to bring peace, but a sword to divide father against son, son against father. Psychology, they call this family systems. Uh, After I got healed of this root issue with my dad, I started being able to have more confidence in myself and do a heck of a lot more than I ever had before. Plenty of confirmations about this, and so I started basically not being violent, but I would stand up to, my dad's, what a former psychiatrist said, hypercriticism and control. I've had 3 mental health professionals tell me to leave my family permanently. When they talk even to other family members and stuff and realize some of the nutty characteristics here. This situation's called family systems. If someone moves out of their prescribed role in a family, uh, where they're pigeonholed, the rest of the members of the family try to move them back into line with their prescribed role. That's why my sister said things in court. To There's a lot of knee-jerk control issues and assumptions about me that were not really founded. Like I could never do anything, I could never accomplish anything. Da 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 da. Well, that was my dad's narrative. That's what he always wanted to believe, no matter what I did. Um, and so, it's a complicated situation. But in homelessness, after a number of other miraculous confirmations, church, if I talked about my situation, family issues, I was basically cursed. People would say to me that God wouldn't tell me certain things that he had told me. A lot of stigma. And I was so open that it kind of, left wounds with me that I didn't even realize. And uh, secondary to, disestablishment from my former psychiatrist, who told me to leave my family permanently. Later on, after the guardianship, she said my case would have warranted a compelling civil rights lawsuit. She was a Christian. She didn't find me psychotic. She didn't find me delusional. There was a whole lot of issues enmeshed in the situation. But the thing is that she couldn't help me, as I've said before, without evidence established. She told me there was pharmaceutical corruption here in Texas. There's a whole lot of complex factors once you're reined into a legal situation. The fact is that when I talk about miracles, I'm saying, uh, you know, I read the book Wild at Heart when I had this root memory with my dad healed. And the book talked about the father wound. It talked about asking the Lord what he thinks about you as your daddy. And that's when I had this root memory healing. I didn't, some people say inner healing is not, I didn't seek out some formula for spiritual. I just asked God what he thought about me, personal connection. And I did have a miracle happen. And I started, getting healthier and succeeding in every arena of my life, being able to budget, being able to have executive function more than I ever had. So very, very many things. And the more I succeeded, the more my family was chomping at the bit. Daddy never hurt you as a kid. You're delusional. You're delusional. You're delusional. And, there were other things that happened. I met people in my life who were recovered from mental illness, and it was the same story, a root issue from childhood, some sort of healing of that spiritually, and then the need to be around supportive community and to regulate, working through issues towards healing and complete recovery. Um, there was a huge miracle at a church before I went into homelessness where under Andres Bizzoni, the whole church cried. And in confirmation to what one of these people who I knew who recovered from mental illness, she told me I'd have to believe in myself and what God had shown me and confirmed to me. Because I would face stigma, she said, that people would tell you and curse you that you don't know what you need and you're never going to be able to get off medication and stuff. Well, there was a number of things, including the fact that I believe clearly that God confirmed to me a natural medication that deals with obsessive compulsive, which long term, that's what the clinicians say that I resemble, obsessive compulsive, not schizophrenia. I don't fit the schizophrenic profile. There's 3 categories for schizophrenia, I've been told. Circumstantiality, 1, I fit that. I'm very aware of circumstances. 2, loose, when you're talking to your dead grandmother. I'm very coherent. I'm very present. I recognize reality. I don't jump off buildings and say that I can fly. I don't walk around with poop on my hands. I don't threaten people. I don't accost people. Don't walk, I don't make a habit of walking around naked, anything like that. So the thing is that, I'm not schizophrenic. Professionals have said you resemble complex post-traumatic stress disorder. You resemble OCD. And I believe that God did show me I have, obsessive compulsive as a generational thing. But anyway, the point being is that there were a number of confirmations. And then one of the people I knew who'd recovered from mental health issues, a pastor's wife who, she said, I don't think it's a coincidence that we met. She heard me. She related to my story. She told me that, she was delivered of a trauma issue from childhood and that with the love of her husband, she was able to completely heal. It does take a supportive environment to completely walk out the seed that's planted in you in that way. And, she told me that I would face stigma. And she said, "You're going to have to believe in yourself." And when she said that, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I knew somehow that God was speaking to me. It's like the next day, this is before I went into homelessness, I went to see Andres Bizzoni, international renowned, Christian minister, prophet. And people get up from wheelchairs, the blind see. I mean, all kinds of miracles happen. And he, I was dealing with some spiritual stuff when I had no support. And, I knew what I was dealing with, even after this inner healing of this root, childhood root issue. Anyway, I went up and asked for prayer. He just listened to God. He listened to the Lord. He said, every generational curse is broken. And then, nothing happened immediately, but we were singing a Revelation song. I, remember raising my hands and I saw a light on the carpet. They were talking about Daniel that night. And there's a huge miracle that happened. And, I saw a light on the carpet as we were singing a Revelation song. I stretched out. A wind came into the church. The whole church started crying really, really, really hard. And a number of prophecies, and God revealed to me that I was caused to doubt the inner healing that I had when I read Wild at Heart because of my family's treatment of me. And, in prophecy, the first words were, I made you, I made you, I made you, I made you different, I made you special. Why don't you believe in yourself? Just like this pastor's wife had told me, you're going to have to believe in yourself. This is like the day before. I can verify all these things. This is not what I'm trying to say with this video is that the correlations, the miracles, the themes repetitively are not gobbledygook. And God showed me that I was afraid to stand up for my own testimony because of absolutely no structure, nobody to relate, everybody looking at me through alienation and making me feel bad for, needing to have a structure and a path to walk out recovery. It was cursing from every single direction and false guilt and all kinds of stuff. God confirmed to me that night that for a number of reasons, I was caused to doubt my own testimony. He confirmed to me as he touched me that it was him that spoke to me when I read the book Wild at Heart. A lot of things. What I was going to say about, in homelessness, there were 7 months after this that I tried to find a productive structure to get employed, to do anything. And I could go on, I can expound basically because of controlling financial family dynamics and whimsicality with my father. I was torn between going to school and getting accredited as a musician so I could teach, with strings attached to his emotional abuse, such that even my former doctor, who later said compelling civil rights lawsuit, had tears in her eyes when she saw his behavior and said, you need to leave your family permanently. I knew I did. So I was disestablished from any follow-up from that office with a doctor who cared about me and loved me, who was a Christian. I was in a new, urban district with, underfunded, overpopulated, pharmaceutically corrupt, Muslim, Pakistani, whatever, doctors who probably think I'm an infidel or whatever. They didn't listen to anything I really had to say. I believe God did confirm to me with a fleece that caught fire, if you want to call it that, some confirmations about a medication that's known to help with obsessive compulsive. And I was thriving on it. I was doing better than I ever had before. And they would not allow me to be monitored on that medication. They made me take medications that if I was to get any help with social work care in order to get affordable housing or anything viable to leave the sick family situation and to be able to thrive and to heal and to move on according to what I knew I needed to do. And at the Andres Bizzoni miracle, it was confirmed, everything in your life up to this moment has been orchestrated. You should know what to do. I knew I needed to leave my family. I've had 3 medical doctors in my life tell me I need to leave my family. It's not healthy. It's not healthy. It's toxic. It really is toxic. Really, and I can't communicate with them. And there was no one from the church to arbitrate. There was no one to sit between us and try to have any healthy boundaries or clarity or productive communication. All of that was demonized as the flesh or whatever they wanted to demonize it and curse it as. So much false guilt. The point is, for 7 months, even after these miraculous confirmations, there was a lot of policy issues, a lot of desperation, a lot of newfound responsibilities, a lot of things I didn't know how to juggle, with absolutely no support from any Christians. Really, I mean, viably, tenably, it was always, well, we don't know how to help you, and not looking, not believing or looking into anything that I said, and it was just this sense of maybe I'm doing something wrong, and so a lot of self doubt, a lot of conflict, a lot of anxiety, and I do believe possible satanic cursing. I used to go to coffee shops, and I think there's a lot of people at the coffee shops who I believe cursed me. Okay, I'm being honest. I'm not just saying this. There's further correlations I don't care to share right now. But the point is that when I took the medication, that was Texas has an unconstitutional policy that precludes only pharmaceutical medication, even if there are other treatments or remedies targeting amino acid therapy, namely, or there's a number of other things that could be of benefit. But in Texas, it's 48th in the nation for funding for mental health care. And they do have an unconstitutional policy at MHMR that precludes only pharmaceutical medication. I could go on about this. There are very clear precedents for other kind of stuff that doesn't hurt people. When I was on pharmaceutical medication before for years, I was severely obese. I could not concentrate. I had severe acid reflux. I was told what could cause cancer eventually. I prayed about, God, if you confirm this to me about childhood issues, I believe you're confirming to me that that's the root of my mental health issues. Can you confirm to me a medication that won't make me get cancer eventually? And yes, I had a couple of people recommend inositol and choline, and I went to a coffee shop and I prayed. I was crying because my sisters and dad were being so cruel to me, severely manipulative and cruel. And I felt all alone, and I cried and I said, Father, Daddy, God, if this is really you confirming these things to me, if this is a medication that can help me and not hurt me, I pray that you'd send a confirmation. I went out to the coffee shop. I sat down. Within literally 5 minutes, someone starts speaking about this medication and saying it's known to help with obsessive compulsive, which long term is what the clinicians say I more resemble. The point being is that I started taking it and I was able to thrive better than I ever have in my entire life. The public system would not allow me to get help with affordable housing or anything else, unless I was on pharmaceutical stuff. So when I capitulated out of desperation because no one in the church would help me, I started taking, pharmaceutical medication and having heart palpitations, hallucinations, and seizures. My sisters were being bitches. They took everything that my dad twisted to them out of context. He did. He lied. He would twist things to them. They would tell me I wasn't seeing clearly when they didn't even know what happened between me and my dad. I was the one patiently trying to explain. I was the one articulate, but they would say, you're not seeing clearly, blah, 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 cursing me, trying to give me confusion. Anyway, the point is that over 7 months, I called Youth with a Mission. I called every last place being articulate, giving measured dialogue about what I needed, and people just acted like I was a piece of shit. Piece of shit in the church. Just acted like I was dirty or evil or whatever else. And, I ended up out of desperation going to a certain place that I later believe that I found out was satanic. Blah, 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 opening up and talking about things because there was no one else to talk to. I didn't know they were satanic. It was a natural medicine place and stuff like that. But the point is that I did start to, see spiritual stuff and have torment. And it all happened after I got back on the pharmaceutical stuff. Seizures, heart palpitations, hallucinations, after getting back on the pharmaceutical medication. LSD was the first, psychotropic medication. Look it up. There's a lot of things that are problematic with psychiatry, truly. MK Ultra was a torture program in the 1960s done through psychiatric offices. Look it up. The head of MK Ultra was considered one of the fathers of modern American psychiatry. I'm not making this up. So, people don't know what, institutionalism in medical rape and all that stuff can actually do to a person. They don't know about how evaluations can be misappropriated and lack of trauma-informed care and unjust weights and measures. They don't talk about these things. They talk about abortion, but they don't talk about systems that can, really break people, So the point is that 7 months, I keep trying to bargain and say, I do know what I need. Can I please be evaluated on the natural medication that's working for me and get affordable housing so I can have good boundaries and work through things and, continue to recover? No, flat no. So, I was kind of just spinning, not knowing what to do at all. Um, my landlord, I was illegally evicted from a former apartment complex. I didn't do anything to warrant that. I could talk about it very clearly, hand to God, you know. And in homelessness, I was so shocked that I was evicted that I didn't get my wallet or phone. It was so unreasonable, genuinely, hand to God, unreasonable, that I was so shocked. I didn't even process it was really, I didn't really believe it. I thought there has to be a way to talk this out or to verify what was really happening. And, it turns out that my landlord would not even let me on property during the eviction to get my phone, my wallet. I couldn't access my bank because there's a policy that if you don't have ID, you can't access your bank, which is reasonable. But most people don't understand. It takes like 60 days to get the first form of ID if you're homelessness, and there's like 5. Going through this made me realize why people commit prostitution to eat. If this isn't something that is akin to, an issue that the church can talk about, I don't know what the church can talk about. They need to talk about ID reform for the homeless. They need to talk about that. If Pat Robertson went through 60 days without food, no place to cry, no place to process his thoughts, this is why I became hyper cerebral and my heart split in homelessness. No place, survival mode, no place to even connect with my testimony, to remember my testimony. The Bible says that Jesus said, if someone doesn't understand, the seed that's planted in them, the birds there try to come back and devour it. I think I know what this means. I can elaborate. I can elaborate with many scriptures and all kinds of stuff about trauma theory, recovery model, all kinds of stuff. I really can. But what I'm saying is that, in homelessness, going back to the original point I was trying to make, I asked God because I realized that I had done every single thing with good conscience that I possibly could have done to be able to walk out the things that, everything in your life up to this moment, has been orchestrated. So I did everything according to my conscience that he'd confirmed to me, and had only been given frying pans and slaps in the face and cursing and, little bitty white women who called themselves Christians, at Christian groups, ungrateful or dirty or unclean. It's taken me years to actually read the Bible about, the fat cows of Samaria who grind the faces of the poor into the dirt. God doesn't like this. He doesn't like this. He doesn't like this. He says it. He says it clearly. He says it. He says it. Read Ezekiel 13. Read Ezekiel, read the scriptures about social dynamics and what that means. So the thing is, in homelessness, I realized at a certain point that, I was experiencing some spiritual torment, and I realized that this is not my fault. I'd done everything I could to be reasonable, rational, patient, articulate, gracious, everything I could under suffocating impossibilities with my family, every direction. And I asked God in homelessness the same question I asked him at Wild at Heart. I said, "What do you think about me, Daddy?" And all of a sudden, a wind all at once swept into me. And it was like shards of dark stuff, just, and I realized false guilt and rejection coming out of me. And I realized he didn't forget a single thing he confirmed to me. And it was like a vision passed through my mind as this wind came into me, that he saw me calling youth with a mission. He knew every single phone call that I tried to articulate reasonably with any of the biddies in churches or anything, receptionists, that he saw it all. And it was an overwhelming sense that everyone had treated me through the lens of stigma, and that there was false guilt and rejection trying to defile my conscience because of this. I said, "Daddy, if this is you confirming this to me, please send me a ride to church." And the Spirit gives us faith. It's a deposit. And I knew without doubt. I went and sat out at I-35, government building across from the IHOP. Within 20 minutes, a man named Rex Weisenhunt from Shoreline Christian Center. I found out his name years later because coincidentally, I happened to run into him when I was trying to find, people to look into the situation. I ran into him years later. I didn't know his name. I coincidentally ran into him over at Shoreline Christian Center when, the Casting Crowns concert was a number of years ago. And there was a woman I talked with in the lobby, Jan was her name, who was there the night, coincidentally, she was there the night of the Andre Spazzoni miracle in 2006. She remembered every single prophecy, everything that was uttered. She's the one who thought of Rex, coincidentally. She said, I know a guy who can give you a ride home. Coincidentally, it was the same taxi cab driver. The fact is that, Rex Weisenhunt in homelessness, seven or, 12, number of years earlier, probably 8 years earlier in 2006, no, 2007, he came summer of 2007, that my mind slipped, 2007. He came and picked me up when I knew that God was going to give me a ride to church. He stops across, from the IHOP where I'm at the government building. And he says, son, do you need a ride somewhere? And I said, who sent you here? He said, the Lord Jesus Christ sent me to you today. And I knew it was going to happen already because God gave me the deposit of faith. He did. And Rex came over and, said, can I pray for you? And I said, yes. And I started to tear up. And he prayed for me in tongues. And all of a sudden, there was an explosion. I kind of almost puked something up spiritually. And I felt completely healed and clean and new. But I started to tremble. And I said, God, forgive me if I've sinned. And he says, son, the Lord says, no, this is not your fault. You live in a fallen world. There's a number of other miraculous confirmations with prophecies where something, came out of me from homelessness saying you were against, there was a woman that I met at, a group, a Christian group, and she said, you were called to help many people. And she said, you've been attacked by the spirit of Jezebel that operates both inside and outside the church and in the houses of government. And she said, you're called to be a mighty prophet and you're going to help a lot of people, is what she said. She said, these things are affecting you because you've had no place to sort out what's right and wrong. And a lot of people in authority have said a lot of things to you that are curses, and you need to be able to sort out what's true and what's not from God. And, you need to process that. There's been several confirmations that needing to process and sort through lies and all that stuff. Well, another guy that I met from Austin Stone, not going to name his name, I could, he prayed for me at a guy's house after homelessness, before the guardianship. And he, prayed, and I felt, healing. He basically prophesied everything that this other woman had confirmed. And he told me it's going to be like a surgery. And in the Andre Spazzoni miracle, I'm not going to get into it, but it was like a surgery. Every tree that my father's not planted will be put by the roots. I believe God's confirmed this to me. The point is that he told me, just trust him. God's going to do this. I'm sitting at my breakfast table and no sense of real connection to people, complete alienation to life, more than one mental health professional has said that I've gone through so much trauma in my life as a whole that 98% of people are not going to comprehend it. 98 plus % of people are not going to comprehend it. But that day, after this guy, John, prophesied over me, I'm sitting at my breakfast table and I have a temptation to feel like I'm unforgiving because that's what certain people, and it hit me. I never had a place to process anything. God sees this. All of a sudden, something comes out of the back of my head and they say the amygdala is where trauma is stored. Found this out later. Okay. The point is something comes out of me like it looks, I can see in the spirit. It looks like a neon vampire bat-like thing. And it was whispering, it was attached to the back of my head. It was whispering, you're against the bride, like the bride of Christ, because I was angry at other Christians. You're against the blood. Well, like this woman had prophesied, that's exactly what people at a church that treated me like dog shit, that's what one of the people spoke over me, is that because I was frustrated and helpless and facing murder attempts from other homeless people and betrayal from everyone I'd ever known, period, and police brutality and everything else, because I couldn't get ID and no one would lift a finger to make any phone calls about what are ID catch-22s, nobody did a thing. This guy told me at this church, you're against the bride, you're against the blood. Well, it just lifted out of me. The point is that, past that time, there was still no one to help. And the only my conscience sort of, it's taken me years to process what's happened, but my conscience basically fractured because even though, this stuff started to happen, the guy who prophesied over me wouldn't help me. The lady, nobody would help me. And I didn't know how to maintain a value for what God had even shown me. Anyway, the point is that, stuff attached to trauma. And there's been, many more miraculous kind of things I can talk about, including one of the people who slandered me, a pastor who slandered me, who affected another pastor's, concept of me, who's said things about me that were not true, that went on my psychiatric record, that were not true. I ended up fasting and praying for 2 whole days, and I felt like an explosion in the spirit the second morning, and I felt the spirit that testifies to Jesus, God the Son, the uncreated Son of God. When you're touched by the Spirit of Jesus. And his spirit broke through, and it was this obvious realization that he saw this could not be the past. Legal catch-22s, psychiatric, professional catch-22s. Professionals agreed with me. They couldn't advocate without facts established. Matthew 18:15 through 19. This situation creates cycles, meaningless cycles in people's lives, simply because no one's willing to lift a finger to think about what's even possible. Point being is that day, God showed me that I had false guilt with me still, and that it was from people who even prophesied. The guy who prophesied saying, let it go, it's the past. And, people telling me it was my only obligation just to forgive and all these other things, contrary to everything God had ever shown me. And God showed me there was a root issue of false guilt from that, and it came out of me. I felt the spirit that testifies to Jesus confirming that he saw what everybody else deliberately ignored. And I, praise God, I went downtown and I knew that I was heard and not illegitimate to God for unforgiving. I knew that I was legitimate to God, that he cares. He really did. And it gave me the faith to cry out to him. And I said, Jesus, I want you to tell this pastor and some people from my home church that I grew up in, the pit they've left me in by deliberately, this pastor had lied about me, and it affected this other pastor's concept of me, and he slandered me, and it went on the record. Lies, real lies, not true. He said I threatened people at his church. That did not happen. I was, frustrated at the church. I tried to be as tactful, as patient, as articulate. People acted like I was simply dirty. I had no access to my bank. They would not let me use their phone to make any phone calls. They had plenty of office space. They have, it's kind of a patchouli hippie, artsy sort of, yuppie sort of church. I asked if I could sleep on a couch for a couple of hours because I was reeling with exhaustion, no place to rest my head at all. I asked if I could use a phone or get onto a computer to find out about ID or something. The guy, the only time that could have been misperceived as a threat, misperceived, he tells me to go sleep out on the playground with, gravel and, kids. And I'm thinking, I haven't slept in ages. How can I possibly sleep in the Austin, Texas summer heat on hot gravel? And secondly, I knew that if any of those little, yuppie children, God bless them, came up to me and touched me, I might, out of sheer exhaustion and not deliberately, out of sheer, throw a punch, not, I realized it was completely not a good suggestion at all. And, I said, why is it that nobody can make a phone call to help me get ID? I could take care of myself if someone would help me get ID. I'm going to face a psychiatric railroad experience. I know what's coming if I don't get practical help. And this other guy starts screaming at me, yelling at me in their fellowship hall, saying that, who do I think I am? They're homeless resources. He's been homeless before. No, not in Austin. I don't know where he's from, but, at that time, 2006, incredibly paltry incredibly unhelpful. No, there were not resources. I don't care what he said. And I raised my voice. I said, you have no right to talk to me like this. I said, what makes you think I'm lying? What makes you think I would be deceitful? What makes you think I would want to come to this place, again and again and be treated like this? If I had any other option, I certainly would take it. I said, what have I done to you? Why do you treat me like this? What have I done? And so, I raised my voice. I didn't make any imminent threats on him. I walked out of the fellowship hall, and one of the people who prophesied over me, who her prophecy started to come true, okay, and has come true in God uprooting things, lies and curses. She said that the churches that did this to me, God was going to write the word Ichabod on their placards. So the only thing that I said that could be misconstrued as a threat was, outside the fellowship hall, after being trampled on, like, pearls and pigs and all that other stuff, I point my finger and I say through the window, shaking in utter fury at what was happening to me, I say, this house shall be called Ichabod. And I left. I didn't make any imminent threat on any person. That was never my intention. Before God, that was never my intention. And I did not do that. So a pastor at this church told the cops, I tried somehow to reason, I went back, can some individual possibly hear me, a good Christian? I'm dealing with ID catch-22s that are untenable. He says, there was a litany of things that were so weird that happened, strange. And I believe I saw demonic stuff at that church as well, which this woman also prophesied, putting my context in, I did see things there that I think were false and counterfeit and demonic. Not lying, not lying, not lying. I can talk about it. I can elaborate. So the point is, she said it was a spirit called Jezebel. The point is that, let me think. I'm just so exhausted. Yeah. So basically, the guy who informed this pastor at this church and poisoned his mind and sent my beautiful, gorgeous debutante, privileged, legitimate, with a house, with biorhythms, with food, with stature, gorgeous sister. This other pastor, sent this gorgeous sister of mine, Daddy never hurt you. I'm so sick and tired of hearing it. You just need to be on medicine. Well, you just don't realize what you need. That's why God cried at the Andre Spazzoni miracle. They're not going to understand you, so you're going to have to believe in yourself. I'm not lying. Toxic. I could elaborate what these women have done to me and my own family. I could. Hand to God. He already sees it. He's already sending judgment anyway. I've handed them over to God. They've refused to be helpful in this, in any meaningful, needful. They've refused. They've twisted. They've lied. They've, closed their ears. They've been completely irrational, wicked. This is what my family's done. And I can talk about it. I can. I've tried. I don't want to talk to them anymore. I need to leave them. I need help getting out of the guardianship, getting my diagnosis amended so I don't, face further trauma psychiatrically the rest of my life. I need to be able to be truly free to move on and to leave and not go back. That's what I really do need. The point being is that this pastor sent my sister over to this pastor at this one church, Ichabod or whatever, and she poisoned the pastor's mind. And because of the situation, because I'm the homeless guy and, it's all these assumptions and presumptions without any merit. And that's really what happened. And I can talk about it. If people want to do this Old Testament style, God, you judge between the guilty and the innocent. And, if anybody wanted to do Matthew 18, 15, and 19, I'd love to ask the pastor before everybody there, who did I threaten? What was said? What was said? What was said? What was heard? Who did I threaten? Who did I make any imminent threat on? Did everybody just gossip about me? Did they wag their, forked tongues at me and smile at my face and all? What really happened? Who took a context for burden bearing, for help, for the need of the moment, for who heard a thing? Who did anything productive? I would be more than willing. Hand to God, I would be more than willing to talk about it. More than willing. More than willing. I didn't threaten anybody. And so, the thing is that, stigma, false guilt, rejection, ha ha ha, taxi cab miracle, Rex Weisenhunt, I can name names to all these things. The point is that, years into this, I fasted for 2 days and I realized, there was a guy who got a dream to help me. He called my former psychiatrist. At that point, she said compelling civil rights lawsuit. He tried to get some structure and a project to help me. There were other mental health professionals talking to me. They got what I was saying. They believed me. They could not advocate unless there were facts, cyclical facts established. This has been a cyclical situation. The point is that 2 years after homelessness, trying to work with this other guy, Alan, who tried to help me, I fast for 2 whole days and I pray. And I realized the Holy Spirit broke through. I felt something come out of me and off of me, a false guilt. It's the past, let it go. Lie, realization, discernment, that's not true. God remembers what he started in me. He sees this for what it is. He's just. He remembers me. I'm not evil. I'm not wicked. I know. So I had the confidence to pray to him. I go downtown, in short. I ask God to convict these people from my home church. Not the other Ichabod church that I mentioned. But I say, God, show this pastor who slandered me and his father-in-law and the other counselor in the counseling office the pothole they've left me in. I felt another explosion happen, just like I did at the taxi cab miracle and homelessness. I walked to Starbucks, and within like 2 or 3 minutes, I run into the original pastor who slandered me. And I'd be happy to talk about what happened there. I'd be more than happy to talk about what happened there. I would be happy to. I didn't do anything wrong. I would be happy to talk about what happened. So the point is that I run into him, this guy, Jesse from my home church or whatever, and he actually hears everything he refused to hear at the time that he treated me like poo-poo and, kicked and butted me and, gossiped, slandered me. He hears the things he hadn't heard before, and he says, wow, I'm realizing that we really didn't help you. I thought before that you were refusing the help that we were offering you as a church, but I'm realizing now we didn't help you. He speaks in tongues and says, I'm getting that you're like Joseph. I don't care. I just want to be, I just want to, get healed and help people. It's not about, all this other stuff. But he speaks in tongues and says that, which 2 other people did around the same time. I'm getting that you're like Joseph. I'm not, I can name names. I'm just saying, to me, it doesn't matter. I just want to do the right thing. And I just want to have a footing to walk out things God confirmed to me. And I want to be able to be a blessing to have people and have friends. I don't want to be all about me. I don't. I know that, let God judge if I'm lying. I know I'm not lying. The point is that, this man, this pastor who slandered me to this other guy, he could have been pivotal had he been willing to say, I had a divine appointment with Danny. Can we talk about communication? There's been maybe some misperception issues. Did he really threaten people at your church? If he didn't, can you clarify that on the psychiatric? Can you write a statement about that? Because all of his rights to be able to move on have been taken. Even if God heals him completely, the system, he doesn't have any right to plan for life, to budget, to, correct his record. If anything could be taken out of context again, he is medically raped at the drop of a hat. Family dynamics are dysfunctional here. This man could have been pivotal had he been willing to do something. The headship of the church somehow determined that, no one was allowed to help me, to help Danny. That's what they did. So this man who spoke in tongues, Joseph, he was forbidden from being able to do anything to be able to help. And to this day, I have no idea why. No idea why. The point being is that, there's several more things I could point to, names, clear confirmations, clear fact, clear correlations about a number of things. I wanted to do this video so that the alienation and overwhelm that most people would have when they look at the first video. People would be able to say, well, how do you qualify a miracle? How do you say this or that? I would be willing to get on lie detector. I'd be willing to have a statistician evaluate the likelihood of all these, divine appointments and things. They're really compelling. I could go on and really compelling time, coincidences. It's an amazing, God's done a lot for my life. Currently, I want to give an update to, praise report. Now that I don't have to be around toxicity with my family, now that I have boundaries with them, now that I have the ability to, eat and regulate, there's been a number of things that God's been, uprooting from me and clarifying what's not from Him and things that were spoken that were not from Him. I'm gaining in the ability to, trust more. And, the word says He caused us to stand firm in our faith through Jesus. I know that I've been hurt about Him completing everything that He started within me. And I have no doubt about it. And He's helping me to believe my testimony. In short, not having any structure at all, every time that God would break something through to me, a personal miracle or anything, there was a lot of emotion behind these blocks within me. There was a lot of hurt. If I started to process anything, it was never safe, first of all. Secondly, if I tried to even emote or process or communicate what God was doing within me, I would get what I call frying pans. People, ew, well, why do you talk about the past? It was like, these are things I haven't, there was no footing. When that happens, it's like the devil uses that to break your sense of being able to receive. The Lord said when someone doesn't understand the word that's planted in them, the birds of the air try to come back and devour it. I know what this means. When God's trying to heal you of stuff attached to trauma, that's not your fault. Whatever Ezekiel 34 talks about, the good shepherd seeking the wounded sheep who've been kicked and butted and given muddy waters, defilement by the fat. This is in Scripture. God does seek out the hurt people. He does heal the broken heart. And, just because there might be an alleged spiritual component doesn't mean that I'm a cult leader, doesn't mean I want to have naked women all over me, doesn't mean any of those things. Any of those things. It means that I'm actually honest about my experience. And for simply being honest about my testimony, why should that be called delusion? If psychiatry is based upon empiricism and can only measure observable, measurable, sort of things, what right does a psychiatrist have to say that any and every alleged spiritual experience is delusion? Trauma theory recovery model. Cognitive distortions get latched onto trauma, and when there's safety established, time to regulate and process through things, a force greater than a person's cognitive willpower meets them at the subcortical level, amygdala, and frees them from the power of the cognitive distortions. This is exactly, you're against the bride, you're against the blood. This is exactly what God's done with me. But being under, every time there's one root issue that's solved or something, not having any way to, put stuff in context regularly, consistently, no structure whatsoever for hope or legitimacy or not further rejection, not invalidation, not false guilt, not, no structure of support whatsoever at all, professionally, church-wise, socially, only ostracization, much bottleneck of pain, so much bottleneck, all this stuff. The fact is that with no way to know how to walk that out, it's sort of like, I know the enemy tries to cause me to stumble and not really know how to even maintain a value for these things. I've lived this. I have lived this. And so, the thing is that now that I've had a relatively safe place, thank God, the memories of things that He's done for me are coming back. He's allowing me to remember and believe my testimony. He's allowing me to integrate and to process the meaning of my experience, to be able to understand that I'm not evil for having repressed, anger that I haven't dealt with. He's helping me to be, see clearly. And there is actual deliverance happening with me. I can talk about it very, very, very clearly. Even if I'm delivered with a litany of things that have been taken out of context at the public system, I don't know how to be able to safely, reasonably, if I say that I'm healed, that's considered possibly symptomatic according to some atheist or Muslim, psychiatrists or whatever. I'm not making this up. I could, I'm serious about this. And what they can do to people is absolutely unreasonable. I think it's very strange that inpatient psychiatric settings, you get people crowded with other crazy people who are violent, put their genitals in your face regularly, threaten you with rape. You have no ability to regulate your emotions. If you cry, that's symptomatic. If you express frustration, that's symptomatic. Everything you do, they can pigeonhole into insurance categories, to profit off of. And if you get mad at that, that's symptomatic. It's just, you're hyperverbal or whatever. It's I don't see how people can talk about abortion or sex slavery and realize that there are policies that allow humans with badges to leave people in morally traumatizing, morally injurious, traumatic, suffocating environments of disempowerment with no access to information or emotional regulation or normalcy or legitimate grieving or frustration or any of those things, much less quality assurance to make sure there's not misdiagnosis happening. Really, no access to look into the laws that affect you, to look into statutes or precedents that could affect you, endless wondering about what's being reported or taken out of context. No tenable access to humane parameters at all, even to have trauma investigated. 9 times in 2006 in homelessness, I was released. You're not a danger to yourself or others. I would say, can someone help me get ID? Unless someone helps me get ID, I'm going to have to come back here. They never once did that. Not only that, there's several things I could talk about, psychiatrist and homelessness during that time saying you're the most informed patient that I've ever met. If you get help that you say you're going to get in the community, you're going to be fine. Well, nobody helped me. And on top of that, even if a patient hasn't voluntarily committed to these clinics, the bills can be skyrocketing. Like, even if they're not necessary, even if there's misdiagnosis, even if there's wrongdoing, $10,000 hospital stays that don't really do anything that I'm supposed to pay for. If this isn't a civil rights issue, if Christians think that sex slavery or a new normalcy of, genitals in your face, a new normalcy of if you stand up against a threat of rape, you're, oppositional to, you're confrontational, no quality assurance even to make sure that your professionals are, willing to receive your assessments about your medical history. There's so much abuse that really can and does happen when there's not measures for checks and balance. If anything is a moral humanity, civil rights issue, this is, and I don't know how people can go to sleep at night knowing that right outside, in the streets, there's identification catch-22s where people have to wait at least 60 days. 60 days. 60 days to get the first form of ID. Maybe having to commit prostitution. If anything is causing a little one to stumble, I would think it would be these oppressive statutes. And if people can vote for anti-abortion, I mean, I'm against abortion. If people can actually vote for these things, I don't see how they can deliberately turn a blind eye to these kind of things. I'm not against psychiatry totally, but there should be, looking into trauma-informed care. There should be looking into, non-pharmaceutical interventions like targeted amino acid therapy. There should be the Faith Myers precedent. There's so many things I could point to that most people think in a good society, we want to believe America's good. These things would already be back of the hand. They're not. And the lack of checks and balances leaves tremendous potential for abuse. And, I don't see that simply acting like this is okay is going to glorify God. I don't believe that in the slightest. I believe it's a terrible sin that causes, a perpetuating like Holocaust experience, like indefinitely, until statutes are reformed, until there's quality assurance, whistleblower protection. These are real urgent issues. And so the thing is, I just want to say, praise God. I'm in this place now without having to be ambivalent towards myself, that I'm able to believe and receive the healing that He has confirmed to me. And I'm sensing so many things being healed, so many cognitive distortions, strongholds. God is uprooting and clarifying what was been His voice, what's not been His voice, what His character is like, what normalcy is like, what being a child of God is like again, what identity feels like again. And He ultimately is my daddy. And He ultimately defends His oppressed. I'm very thankful. I could definitely use people to regulate, is what it's called, being able to talk out. We overcome by the word of our testimony, to talk out things that God's making clear, to be able to process with people, to be able to have from that group of people to go back and talk to people who slandered me. Did any really threaten people? What really happened here? There's a number. I wrote a 32 point for point refutation of everything my sister said about me in court. I could have proven that everything she said was out of context and false. I could have. If there's going to be any real freedom from false precedents that have left like a tattoo on my arm of, endless possible further internment situations, to truly have that, I would have to correct my record. I would have to be able to amend falsified things. And for that to productively happen, I would need, people from the private sector. I can't afford an attorney. I would need people to say, okay, what do you feel needs to be taken into context? It could go into my psychiatric record. That could ensure a bulwark of protection from these false precedents the rest of my life. As I say that Jesus has healed me, I'm not going to be medically raped again at the drop of a hat. This is real. This is not gobbledygook. So the reason I want to do this video is to clarify, when I talk about miracles, it's not just, intangible sorts of things, completely intangible and completely subjective. There are names of witnesses. There are names of, these things are so coincidental. The taxi cab coming when I knew he would, running into the pastor who slandered me, all of cognitive distortion, you're against the bride coming out of me, just as was prophesied and confirmed. Many more things I could say, many more things I could say about how God has worked and done divine appointments. But even if people get a download that what I'm saying, is from God, they've never, ever had the courage. They've seemed cowardly. They've seemed heavenly minded, no earthly good. People in my situation, unless people actually strengthen the weak and reform your courts into true halls of justice, unless they make clear policy reform about these things. And it can happen. I mean, the fact is that, psychiatry cannot measure spiritual experience. If there's a patient who claims that they're having a spiritual experience, which resembles trauma theory literature, all this other stuff, and they're not observably harmful, if they're coherent, if they exhibit executive functioning and self-control and, can budget, there ought to be measures for them to be able to be observed on target amino acid therapy, or things that, are natural. There ought to be policies for them to be followed up as they claim they're recovering. Because the policies as it are, it's just, there's many more things I could say. But basically in this video, I wanted to give an update of the character of these issues. And when I say that things can be qualified, made specific, not only about my situation, but for reform, I am not just saying that. And I could elaborate about, Jaakko Sekula's non-affective psychosis model from Finland, which mirrors the complex post-traumatic stress disorder trauma theory recovery model. There's so many correlations in trauma theory research and things like that, psychiatric research, that resemble everything God's actually done for me, which resembles stuff that I've seen in scripture. This is not gobbledygook, and people should not have to be afraid of their testimony. They should not, um, in America, be labeled as delusional if they're not. And none of the things I talk about are not able to be vetted, verified, made clear. This is all very, very clear. And my heartfelt desire is to help people inside the church and outside the church. I see correlations between scripture, things I've experienced, and, clinical issues. And I think there's a lot of stuff that the church could learn about trauma from these trauma studies. I think there's a lot of stuff that psychiatry could be, learn about possibly, the character of these spiritual issues. The point is that these things are not illogical. They're not non-definable. They're very clear. And I've had like 10 professionals say, if you could, get evidence, I'd be willing to, put it in the psychiatric record. I'd be willing to advocate for you if facts were established. They've said this. And there's never been a vehicle for that. And I need that. I do need that. And so I appreciate your time. I just thought I would give some clarification to some things. And there's a lot of good things happening, and I rejoice in that. But this is a process. I've got a lot to grieve through, a lot to sort through. Anger is not a sin. Anger is not a sin. And I don't have to put on a face for Jesus. He knows what everybody else refuses to know. And that's some of the miraculous confirmation too, is that he showed me he cares about what everybody else refused to take a context for. He's good, and he is God. So, he's good. He's good. So I just wanted to give an update about these things. It went a lot longer than maybe I anticipated, but I wanted to bring some clarity because how alienating all of that might seem. I felt like I needed to do something to clarify, the real viability and the real legitimacy of these things past some sort of veil of subjective or undefinable or unqualifiable. Most people want to interject that over me and say, oh, it's just you really can't prove anything. When I say I could prove stuff, why do people jump to that conclusion without hearing the rationale? Why do people jump to that conclusion without hearing what could be proven? Universally, everybody did this. And yes, I fully believe that God confirmed to me that everybody really did get these things wrong. I'm not just saying that. So, I'm growing, I'm getting healthier. I'm enjoying life a lot more. There's so much more I could say about science, targeting, chemical imbalances incited through trauma, how diet and eating fats and sleeping regularly, all of these things help a person to regulate through things. I am getting better. If anyone wants to look at my Facebook profile and, see if I'm inarticulate or, any of they can do that. But I'm not delusional. I'm not schizophrenic. I'm not schizoaffective. I can be completely healed in Jesus' name, and I know how to walk this out. I don't want to have a litany of things out of context spank me, forgive me, for the rest of my life. I know what's necessary, and it will require an actual, like a project with a number of people with relatively bite-sized commitments. I think my situation, if helped, could be a model to help countless other people. So God bless you. I'm thankful to God, and He is at work, and I'm very grateful. This is still a process, but I'm able to, like the Israelites when they went into, the promised land, they put remembrance stones with note cards, with Google Drive, with journaling. I'm able to isolate the things I know God's confirming to me and uprooting from me and replacing with His truth and His love and His healing and His compassion. I'm able to say, this is what He did for me. I know this, no matter what anybody else thinks. And I'm able to have a testament to myself about what He's actually doing that no one else can violate, that no one else can take my sanctuary and trample down and tear off my hooves, like, Antichrist illusion, comparison. But it's finally a sense of a footing. And I'm very grateful. But yeah, everything I've said, there's needs for people to mediate with my family. I can't afford a professional to do this. I can't. And so, maybe if there's fundraising or something, I could. But to me, the most obvious thing would be people to do what Matthew 18:15 through 19 says. If people would have done that a long, 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 long time ago, all of this could have been spared. So bear you one another's burdens. Remember those suffering as if it were you suffering. Um, to the word and to the testimony. Why whisper and mutter? These things are all in Scripture. So Satan is a liar, and God leads us into all truth and sets us free. And uh, His love, His touch, His compassion is better than life itself. So real, so good. And I just wanted to give an update, some context, illustrate some of the dynamics, some of the factors, the plausibility, some of the context, um, so that people could get a sense of concept. Thank you, and I hope you have a blessed day. I'm going to continue to post good music on my Facebook page and stuff like that, and uh, I hope uh, I hope you come to find the love of the Lord. Okay, bye bye.